The letter sat on Johnny Carson's desk. And before the monologue began, he said, "I have to do this first." It was March 1982. The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Studio 6B in Burbank. The audience had filed in, excited for another night of laughs and celebrity interviews. The band was ready. Ed McMahon sat in his usual spot, that familiar grin on his face. The cameras were positioned. Everything was set for a normal Tuesday night. But Johnny Carson wasn't looking at his cue cards. He was looking at an envelope that had arrived at the NBC offices 3 days earlier. A small envelope with a child's handwriting. The kind of letter the show received by the hundreds every week, fan mail, requests, jokes people wanted Johnny to tell. This one was different. The producer had flagged it. Brought it to Johnny's dressing room before the show. "You should see this," he'd said quietly, handing over the envelope. "It's from a kid. 9 years old. He's dying, Johnny. Cancer. He wrote to you because you're his hero." Johnny had read it alone in his dressing room. Once. Then again. Then he'd folded it carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and sat in silence for 10 minutes before the show started. Now he was on stage. The audience was applauding his entrance. The cameras were live. Millions of Americans were settling in front of their televisions expecting the usual Tonight Show opening. A monologue full of topical jokes, political jabs, that trademark Carson timing. Johnny walked to his desk. He didn't wave to the audience with his usual energy. He sat down slowly, and instead of picking up his cue cards, he picked up the envelope. The audience sensed something was different. The applause faded uncertainly. Johnny looked directly into camera one. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Before we start tonight's show, there's something I need to do. Something more important than anything else we had planned." He held up the envelope. 3 days ago, this letter arrived at NBC. It's from a 9-year-old boy named Michael. Michael lives in Ohio. And Michael is dying. Before the monologue began, Johnny Carson held up a letter and said, "I have to do this first." The words of a 9-year-old dying child were about to freeze the studio. The studio went completely silent. Ed McMahon's smile vanished. Doc Severinsen leaned forward in his seat with the band. 300 audience members sat motionless, suddenly understanding this wasn't going to be a typical show. "Michael wrote to tell me," Johnny continued, carefully removing the letter from its envelope, "that he watches The Tonight Show every night with his parents. That I make him laugh even when he's in pain. That he wanted to write to me before." Johnny's voice caught. He paused, composing himself. "Before he runs out of time." Johnny unfolded the letter. His hands were steady, but his jaw was tight. The paper was lined notebook paper, the kind kids use in school. The handwriting was careful, neat despite obvious shakiness in some of the letters. "I'm going to read this to you," Johnny said. "Because Michael asked me to. And because I think we all need to hear it." He cleared his throat and began. "Dear Mr. Carson, my name is Michael Patterson. I am 9 years old. I have leukemia. The doctors say I probably won't be here for my 10th birthday in May." The words hung in the air. Someone in the audience made a small sound, half gasp, half sob. Johnny didn't look up. He kept reading. "I watch your show every single night. My parents let me stay up past my bedtime because the hospital says I should do things that make me happy. You make me happy. When you do your funny faces and tell jokes, I forget about being sick for a little while." Johnny's voice was becoming rougher, but he pushed through. "I wanted to write to you because I wanted to say thank you. And because I wanted to tell you something important that I learned." Johnny paused. This was the part that had broken him when he first read it in his dressing room. He took a breath and continued. "When you're 9 years old and you know you're going to die soon, you start noticing things that other people don't notice. Like how my mom cries when she thinks I'm sleeping. Or how my dad's hands shake when he helps me with my medicine. Or how my little sister Emma draws pictures for me every day because she doesn't know how to say goodbye. The studio was utterly silent. Not a cough. Not a whisper. Just Johnny's voice and the devastating words of a dying child. But I also noticed the good things. Like how my mom still reads me bedtime stories even though I'm 9 and probably too old for that. Like how my dad tells me about all the baseball games we're going to watch together, even though we both know we won't. Like how Emma leaves her favorite stuffed animal in my bed when I'm at the hospital. Johnny had to stop. He looked down at the letter, blinking rapidly. The camera stayed on him. In the control room, the director whispered into his headset, "Don't cut. Stay on him. America needs to see this." After a moment, Johnny found his voice again. "Mr. Carson, here's what I learned. When you don't have much time left, you realize that the most important thing isn't how long you live. It's how much love you give and get while you're here. And I've gotten so much love. From my family. From my friends. And from you, even though you don't know me. You gave me laughter. That's a kind of love too." Carson stopped reading. The entire studio froze. Johnny carefully placed the letter down on his desk. His hands were shaking slightly now. He looked at the camera, and his eyes were filled with tears. "There's more," he said, his voice barely steady. "But I need a moment." He turned to Ed McMahon. Ed's face was wet with tears. The two men looked at each other, no words, just that look between old friends who understand when something matters more than the show. Johnny turned back to the camera. "I'm going to finish reading this. But I need everyone watching at home to understand something. Michael sent this letter knowing he might not be alive when it arrived. Knowing he might never see me read it. He sent it anyway because he wanted to leave something behind. A message. Not just for me, but for everyone." He picked up the letter again. "Mr. Carson, if you're reading this on TV like I hope you are, I want to say something to everyone watching. Don't waste time being angry or sad about little things. Don't wait to tell people you love them. Don't forget to laugh, even when things are hard. And don't be afraid." Johnny's voice cracked on that last word. A tear ran down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. "I'm not afraid anymore. I was at first. But my mom told me that when people die, they become stars in the sky. So every night before I go to sleep, I look at the stars and think about how I'll be up there soon, looking down at everyone I love. That makes me less scared." The audience was crying openly now. Doc Severinsen had his head bowed. The camera operators, professionals who'd seen everything in 15 years of Tonight Show broadcasts, were wiping their eyes. "So Mr. Carson, thank you for making me laugh. Thank you for being on TV every night so I never felt alone. And please tell everyone watching that life is short, even when you get to live a long time. So make it count. Make people happy. Make them laugh. Like you do." Johnny finished reading and carefully refolded the letter. He placed it back in its envelope and set it gently on his desk. Then he did something unprecedented in the history of The Tonight Show. He stood up and walked away from his desk toward the audience. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The control room erupted. "What's he doing? Where's he going? Do we follow him?" "Follow him," the director said quietly. "Just follow him." Johnny walked to the front row of the studio audience. He stopped in front of a middle-aged woman who was crying, clutching a tissue. He reached out and gently took her hand. "Michael's mother called the show this afternoon," Johnny said, still holding the woman's hand but speaking to everyone. "She wanted to let us know that Michael passed away yesterday morning. Peacefully. At home. Surrounded by his family." A collective sound of grief moved through the studio, 300 people mourning a child they'd never met. "She also wanted me to know," Johnny continued, his voice thick with emotion, "that the night before Michael died, he asked her to make sure this letter got to me. He said it was important. He said people needed to hear it." Johnny released the woman's hand and turned back to face the cameras. He walked slowly back to his desk, but he didn't sit down. He stood beside it, one hand resting on the wood, the letter visible beneath his palm. "I've been doing this show for 20 years, Johnny said. "I've interviewed presidents and movie stars and musicians. I've told thousands of jokes. I've made people laugh. But I have never received anything as profound as this letter from a 9-year-old boy who understood more about life than most of us learn in 90 years. He picked up the letter again. "Michael asked me to read this on television. To share his message. And I'm going to honor that. But I'm also going to do something else." Backstage, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. Johnny looked directly into the camera. "We're not doing the show tonight. Not the regular show. No monologue. No celebrity interviews. No comedy sketches. Instead, we're going to spend this hour differently." The producers in the control room looked at each other in panic. "He can't just cancel the show. We have guests. We have." "Let him do it," Fred de Cordova said, his own eyes red. "Let him do what he needs to do." Johnny addressed the audience in the studio and at home. "Tonight I want us to think about Michael. And I want us to think about every child fighting a battle they shouldn't have to fight. Every parent sitting in a hospital room. Every person who needs to hear that laughter matters. That love matters. That the time we have, however long or short, matters." He sat back down at his desk. "I'm going to read Michael's letter again. All of it. And then I'm going to tell you about a foundation that Michael's parents are starting in his name to help other families dealing with childhood cancer. And we're going to talk about what really matters in life." The camera stayed tight on Johnny's face as he read the letter a second time, slowly, carefully, letting every word land. When he finished, he set it down and looked up. "Doc," he said, turning to the bandleader, "can you play something soft? Something beautiful? Something worthy of a 9-year-old boy who understood love better than most adults." Doc Severinsen, tears streaming down his face, raised his trumpet and played. Not the upbeat Tonight Show theme. Something slower. Sadder. More beautiful. The kind of melody that breaks hearts and heals them at the same time. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. As Doc played, Johnny reached into his desk drawer and pulled out his personal checkbook. Live on television, in front of millions of viewers, he wrote out a check. He held it up briefly to the camera, not close enough to show the amount, but enough to show he was writing it. "This is for Michael's foundation," Johnny said simply. "And I'm asking anyone watching at home who can afford it to send something too. Any amount. $5. $10. Whatever you can manage. Because Michael was right. The most important thing is how much love we give and get. And sometimes love looks like helping families you've never met get through the worst days of their lives." He gave the address information for the foundation. He spoke about the work they would do, helping families pay for treatment, providing support, funding research. The show ran 20 minutes over its scheduled time. NBC led it. Commercial breaks were skipped. The network absorbed the cost. Because everyone, from the executives to the cameramen to the millions watching at home, understood they were witnessing something more important than entertainment. When the show finally ended, Johnny stood and held up the letter one last time. "Michael Patterson," he said, his voice steady now, filled with purpose. "Thank you for your letter. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for reminding all of us what matters. You said you weren't afraid because you'd become a star in the sky. Well, you were wrong about one thing." He paused. "You're already a star. And you always will be." The studio audience rose as one. Standing ovation. Not the excited applause of entertainment, but the reverent applause of people who had been changed by what they witnessed. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Johnny never threw away that letter. He had it professionally preserved and framed. It hung in his dressing room for the remaining 10 years of his Tonight Show run. Every night before he went on stage, he would look at it. Read a few lines. Remember Michael. The foundation raised over $2 million in its first year. Today, 40 years later, it's helped thousands of families. It's called the Michael Patterson Foundation. And on its logo, beneath the name, is a single line from the letter. Life is short. Make it count. Johnny Carson retired in 1992. He gave hundreds of interviews over his career, but he only spoke about Michael's letter once more, in his final Tonight Show broadcast. He said it was the most important moment of his 30 years in television. Not the funniest. Not the most watched. The most important. The letter remained in that frame until Johnny's death in 2005. In his will, he left it to the foundation with instructions: keep it displayed where families can see it. Let them know that a 9-year-old boy named Michael understood what so many of us forget, that love and laughter and the time we share matter more than anything else. Late-night television hosts today still reference that night. When they talk about using their platform for good. When they discuss the responsibility of making people laugh while honoring the serious moments that demand attention. They call it the Michael moment. The night Johnny Carson stopped being a comedian and became exactly what America needed: a person willing to share grief, to show vulnerability, to let a dying child's wisdom change an entire country. The stars are out tonight. And somewhere among them, if Michael's mom was right, a 9-year-old boy looks down at the world he left too soon and knows his message reached exactly who it needed to reach. All of us.